The Periodic Effects Cannabis Business and Science podcast is brought to you by Periodic Edibles, the cannabis caramel company, available in Oregon.
I'm trying to, replace my income in the cannabis industry, but that is, it is rough.
You, in fact, had a comment you wanted to make, Richard, I think.
Well, it's rather moved on. I was just going to say I can't imagine why anyone should think it was an ethical problem. I could see why they might think it was a problem of expedience.
Welcome to the Periodic Effects Cannabis Business and Science podcast. My name is Wayne. I'm the founder and owner of Periodic Edibles, and I'll be your host. I want to let you know about a unique cannabis education tool we created, periodicsearch.com. It's the world's best search engine for video cannabis education and training. You can use it for free at www.periodicsearch.com. This conversation was recorded on July 30th, 2021, and this is from a one-on-one call I had with Andrea. This was an interesting conversation, made me think about some new things I haven't really considered or dived deep into. Andrea's been focused on cannabis education and trying to make it her full-time career. So she's been doing it for a while. She has a couple different channels and revenue sources that she's got going on. But as cannabis evolves, the markets mature, and Andrea's actually in Canada. How does someone that wants to do cannabis education provide that service and value? How do they create a business around it so they can make it their full-time job and path? It's difficult right now. There's a lot of angles, and now we have the internet, so it feels like there's a lot of things out there for free. There's also a lot of BS that you have to filter through. So we dive into different ways to think about the business she's already created and how she might change her direction going forward. She's already doing a couple things and has a great foundation. We actually talk about her YouTube channel in a little bit, and that I have to maybe get some advice from her. But she's currently teaching courses or teaching coaches, cannabis coaches. She has online courses, doing some affiliate commissions and for different products. And we talk about those angles. And then specifically around the target customer, when you're creating cannabis education, and now any product in cannabis, whether it's the plant, the flower, if it's an edible or an ancillary business, it has to be focused. If it's vague and general and just this is for everybody, things are really too saturated now, and that messaging is going to get drowned out in the noise. So kind of brainstorming with her on this target customer, I love it when someone takes their own experience and background and almost makes something they wanted themselves. It allows you a lot more insight because you've been through these experiences. We talk about a category that we kind of work through around stressed out moms maybe struggling with using cannabis because it's helping them, but the struggle of the stigma that's still around cannabis use. Also, raising kids, how that might be viewed even by friends and family that are around them. And maybe that's a group that she can set up her model around because it's something she's experienced, and her background around education. She was an elementary school teacher. She's really got a nice synergy of skills and background. And I think she does have, a path that she can find and really turn this into a career. So we dive into that. And if you're listening to this and you're a mom, raising kids, or maybe thinking about the cannabis use stigma, any of the things we're talking about, reach out to Andrea. I know right now she's kind of going back to the drawing board and figuring out which direction she wants to take. But any direct feedback from someone in that target category that we discuss would be hugely helpful to her. Let her know if anything resonates, or you have any ideas that we didn't hit on that this might be a good way to think about it. Definitely reach out. We have a link in the show notes to her website. I think it goes to the homepage, and if you scroll down, there's a contact form on her website. So go do that. And also, we have a job opportunity at Zion Cannabis. They're in Southwest Portland. So they're looking to hire 2 bud tenders. And it's a great location. Also a good company. They've been around for over 6 years. They started in the medical days. So they have definitely evolved and adopted with the market. And they actually have a couple locations and other business verticals. So it can be a great company to grow with. They just asked us to put the email in the show notes to email your application to apply. So check that out in the show notes. So I also can just stop in the dispensary, the Southwest Portland one, if you want to apply. So check that out. Another job opportunity I wanted to share. And lastly, before we get into it, if you'd like to support the work we do and receive a great product in the process, you can buy one of our full spectrum hemp butter caramels. We ship to pretty much every state in the country, and you can buy our hemp products at periodiccaramels.com. We'd really appreciate your support. Again, that's periodiccaramels.com. Now let's get into the episode.
Oh,
Hey, Andrea, how's it going?
good. How are you?
I'm doing pretty well.
Feel like I'm fangirling a little bit over here.
That's so funny. The last one-on-one call, someone said something. I've really liked these one-on-one calls. I think they're some of these have turned into my favorite conversations. So I've equally been just as interested to meet you and everyone else that's reached out.
That's great. I love that you do this thing. I think it's a wonderful. I don't know. I've been listening to your podcast. For 4 years now, maybe a little bit less. And I've always really enjoyed the way that you talk to people very frankly. You have such an excellent interview style. And then you're also just so honest. I love hearing what's going on in your own business and the struggles that you're having and how you've overcome them and stuff. Your podcast has been a very big part of my journey in this industry. So I appreciate the opportunity to be able to tell you that.
I appreciate that too. Yeah, I'm so happy we started the podcast. There's, one for ourselves, just all the people we've met, and you develop many relationships you wouldn't have otherwise. But also, just being able to share that content. I was kind of looking for something around cannabis when I started, and there were a couple out there, and it feels like most podcasts, they're very, it's kind of more of a marketing person that's doing it, but maybe not someone actually operating in what they're talking about. And it's just hard to find stuff like that. So yeah, when I go back early on and listen to those early ones, I'm like, these aren't that good, but they're always honest. And it's like, well, this is what we're seeing. So I think that, people find some value in that.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Where are you located?
I am in Ontario, Canada, about 2 hours away from the border at Detroit.
Okay.
You're a Michigander, aren't you?
Yeah, about 2 hours. I was close to the border there, where I grew up, downstate, but then I went into the UP for college. So I've definitely got that Midwest accent sometimes comes out, which is also a Canadian accent. Yeah.
People make fun.
They're just jealous.
Of course. Yeah, we have legal weed, so forget about it.
Let's. One thing you said in the email was kind of the struggle around just getting people to pay for education. Yeah. And you said, I thought something that was funny. Someone else in the industry said getting people to pay for education is the hardest way to make money. He said in cannabis, but sometimes that's just in general as well. It's definitely a difficult, tricky area. Selling education now. Yeah.
I'm an elementary school teacher by trade. I've been teaching for about 20 years. And here in Ontario, we actually make really good money. We're a valued profession and we have a good pension and we have good benefits, but our education system is in shambles, and I'm finding it really difficult to maintain my passion for that. So I'm trying to, replace my income in the cannabis industry, but that is it is rough.
Yeah. Tell me what the kind of different products are that you sell. You mentioned teaching coaches. What other areas are there?
Yeah, that's the bulk of my income right now. Then, a lot of that information at least stems in part from listening to you geek out on podcasts and then me going and having to, find that information and dig into it. So that's where, that's how I am paying the mortgage right now. But that was supposed to be a side hustle. I was supposed to be doing this on my own. So I sell a couple of online classes, neither one of which do very well. And I make some money through affiliate income through let's say Ardent Decarbers and Magical Butter. And then I also do private consultations, which helps to pay the bills. But yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts on expanding audience or avenues to look at in this space.
Yeah. What, so the bulk is teaching coaches, and then what's set number 2, private consulting as far as just revenue right now?
It's probably actually affiliate income from my
Okay.
YouTube channel.
Okay. Got it. What are your channels used for marketing right now?
Very little for actual marketing. I'm on Instagram and Facebook, and I try to keep a presence there, but I'm finding that it's good because people will reach out and find me and see that I have a following, but I don't find it to be a direct line to business.
Right.
I don't advertise because we have the same restrictions that you do because, Facebook's your country's following your country's laws. So I wouldn't say I have an advertising system in place or marketing.
And the YouTube channel, do you put a decent amount of effort into that, or how's that going?
Yeah, I have. I started that when I started coaching, and
what's it called?
Saw a big jump during the pandemic, which I think every YouTube creator did. But I do see that as something I can focus on. Although I can't monetize the channel yet, I do. It's a passion of mine to teach people about cannabis. So there's partially that, but also it legitimizes me, and people do find out about me, and sometimes they click on my links and buy stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, wow. You got 10,000 followers. So you got a pretty good sized channel going. How long have you been doing it? YouTube?
I started that I'm coming up on 3 years.
Okay.
But I also, part of my journey was that I left teaching for 2 years to work on Reveal and worked my ass off. Yeah. But then last year had to come back to teaching elementary school in order to maintain my position in the board. So basically I wasn't in the cannabis world for this past year. And I've just started over the past couple of weeks re-upping my game on YouTube. Okay.
Got it. Yeah, education is interesting because there's so many different ways you can try to take it. And I always think the core of education, no matter however you try to bring in revenue, and there's really 2 ways, a product or a service. It's really the audience that you build. And if you have the audience and they're following you, then what you want to do with that or how to monetize, there's so many ways you can go. But I think what's important early on, a lot of times when like cannabis or someone like yourself goes out, looking for like, well, what direction should I go? People start talking about marketing, getting more people's attention, possibly trying to run ads if that's possible. But I always like to backtrack to the core offering and the long-term goal. Because if those aren't lined up right, product market fit isn't there, no matter how much you spend on marketing or bringing people in. You might get some one-off buys, but really what you want is people to stick around, and repeat customers are always the best customers in business. Because it's hard to go finding new people constantly. So let's start with kind of just the core of the business then and the strategy. So you kind of wanted to switch from teaching into this full time. Is there a certain like size or scale you need it to get to? Do you think longer term you just want to stay a one person operation? What do you kind of need to set up initially so that you are able to kind of walk away from the teaching side and pay the bills?
Yeah. The way I ideally see it is that, yes, I'm basically a one-person operation. Like I hire some things out. I'm working with a video editor, and I've hired a publicist in the past. But I'm not looking to create like a business like yours where you have staff and things like that necessarily. Sure. So yeah, I see myself as kind of the one and only with support systems in place. Mm-hmm. I don't know if that answers the question.
Yeah, it does. And you can do a lot, especially nowadays when you virtual assistants and editing and a lot of stuff you can kind of contract out versus hiring someone like full time. So the coaches are the biggest area of revenue right now. Longer term, you said, I think initially that was kind of your side hustle. If that became the full business, would you like that? Or do you want to create something else for longer term stability that you think might be better?
I really love the work that I'm doing. I would absolutely love it if it became a full-time gig with more I don't know. I'm not sure that this is going to be my full-time gig. I think this will be a big boost. But I think, I don't think it's going to be the full-time forever thing.
Yeah. Yeah. You want something you have the actual ownership over, control.
Yeah.
Well, I think you're right. Like longer term, I would also be it's so hard to know where cannabis is going to go. And it's not, the skill set will definitely be useful, but I wonder, like you said, it's so hard to sell education online. A lot of these people, like if this will be a constant influx of new students, and if they're going out and having, struggles with actually building their own business, which is a really hard thing to do, longer term, I wonder if that will slow down that area a bit. And it really depends a lot on the market demand for that type of person. And it's still so new, we don't know what it's really going to be longer term. Yeah.
What are your thoughts on working with cannabis companies as an educator, either as a consultant or like, I'm thinking about what Emma did, how she worked with lots of different companies. Is that something that you see as something that's needed, or have you seen that position within companies in your area where they need people who are going to educate their consumers about cannabis, I guess? Yeah,
I think that's kind of more on the consulting side, which is what Emma does. I'm not as familiar with, but I think there's a decent sized market, and it's normally bigger companies if they're going into new areas, that can come in, help them get set up, people from outside of cannabis that need to know all this stuff. You can consult there. And that's kind of more business side of things, which teaching coaches also really is a B2B kind of business to business thing. They're not really the consumer using the end product. They're going to go out and then offer it to someone. So that's another big distinction that's important is, do you want to build an audience with the end user and figure out your business around that? Or do you want to build a business like on the back end with another type of business, Yeah.
That's a really good question to consider. I think like off the cuff, I'm way more passionate about the end user than other businesses.
Yeah. It looks like that's what you're setting up for. Even your YouTube channel, that's an end consumer channel. Like that's perfect what you're doing on YouTube right now.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. I was trying to think of a few ideas and kind of back to education. If you have the ability to get almost basically be giving it away for free, the education, and you sell something else. So if it's a product, the affiliate piece like you have going right now might be a great area to try to expand further. The value of it's really just going to be based on your audience size and how much they might consume or use or buy that product. I think you got to be very clear about that. You don't want to say, oh, here's a discount code for a product, and then you're also making commission on that. So you want to be clear with your following. And you can also say, listen, this is how I make my money. I have to pay a mortgage as well, and this is my revenue source. And over time, you can always transition too. Things change as you grow. So if you get a bigger audience, you could say, well, I've got a Patreon account now. And if there might be more offerings there. But so that's one area. I think the other area, you're doing private consults. That longer term also is not as scalable. And it's private, so you can't really. One thing I like to do if it's like these, right? If you can make it into content, then it is scalable because there's a marketing value there. And that might be a harder business to develop, and it's kind of a one-off, right? If you get a private, how many they get 1 or 2 private consults, they probably don't need anymore. So you're again back to trying to find new people constantly, which is difficult.
Yeah. It's not, I've learned a lot from consulting over the past 3 years. Like I feel like I have a really excellent handle on how to get people started with cannabis, but, people start sleeping better and feeling better, and then you never hear from them again. So, which is great. That's what you want, but it's not super fulfilling.
Yeah. Yeah. It makes it difficult.
Yeah.
The other areas you could look at that, if you're giving away education, building an audience, things you can also do is some kind of community, like a private community that's selected or filtered. And this comes also back to the target customer. So if you were focusing on just dogs and pets, that's a great niche that you could build up around. People really care about their pets. They might join that community. And then you're also down the road, not just about cannabis. If you don't want, you could bring in other things for pets that also apply, whether it's health, nutrition. So there's a lot of other like affiliate commissions you could potentially earn there. You can look at something like that. Do you have an idea for like a target customer, I guess? I think you need to pick a narrow focus with who exactly what your, would be your ideal customer.
It's funny because my target client was me, which was like a 30 or 40-year-old mom who was stressed right out and needed cannabis in order to like live, just to be like a happier mom and not so terrified and awful all the time. And it turns out that the people that I love working with are people who are brand new to cannabis and have no idea where to start. But that is that's not a niche. That's what 80% of the world are brand new to cannabis.
Right.
So, yeah.
Well, the niche there is not brand new, but 30 to 40-year-old mom that's stressed out. That is a good target. That's more focused.
It's more focused, but it doesn't seem to be who I'm attracting. Like, most of my clients are probably half and half, male and female, and they are all over the place for age. But I guess that's them finding me rather than me deciding who I'm specifically targeting to. Right.
And it's also, even if they find you, it could be because of your current content. If you start making content fully focused on moms 30 to 40, those guys that find you are going to skip off because now they realize that's not for them,
Yeah.
So it's also about what you're messaging and who's going to stick around. Did you have a personal experience, or what made you decide that you wanted to try to make this work in cannabis?
I fell into a really deep depression when I was teaching about 5 years ago. And couldn't get out. I had 2 young boys at home and a husband, and I was, off work, and I tried everything that you were supposed to try, medication. I went to therapy. I went for walks. I did everything. And my mom, about 4 months into this ordeal, brought me over a bag of weed for Christmas and said, I think this might help. And for me, it was like the clouds parting when I smoked the joint the first time. Like, it was like, oh my God, I'm in here. Like, I had forgotten who I was almost. Yeah. And then I was so annoyed because my family doctor told me I shouldn't do cannabis because it was evil. My cannabis doctor told me, good luck, have a good time, no information. So I was really frustrated because I was just getting high all the time, but I needed to also parent my children and go back to work and be a productive member of society. So that's when I was like, oh, I need to be one of those people because there are none. Yeah. So.
Makes sense. Yeah. So cannabis was kind of the opening, but there wasn't the support structure around it to actually integrate it properly. You're flying blind. It's like, it's helping. I know I'm moving in the right direction, but I don't know which direction necessarily is the right one. Yeah. You got to figure all that out.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I think there's an area back to the 30 to 40-year-old moms, and it's almost like that if you did dogs or pets, right? Cannabis is almost, to me, feeling like it's there, but it's not your main value. The main value is this group. If it's a pet owner, that you want your dog to be healthy. If they're older and in pain, they can not be in pain. Oh, and we use cannabis, and that's what one of our focuses is. But you might bring in other nutrition or things later that go well with cannabis. I think you almost need to figure out the value if this is the area you want to go, just focus on moms, and maybe it's affiliate commissions, or if it's a private community, they might pay a monthly subscription fee. And if you're available for one-on-one calls, like real-time support that they can call when they get into one of those moments, and they're wondering what they need to do or they're stressed out, that's hugely valuable. But I think if you, figure out that group and how to message to them what they're looking for. I think later, a lot of times, if you can build the audience, what product or service to sell or monetize with will become obvious later because they'll be asking you for it,
It's I really value that insight. And it reminds me, I also run a women's cannabis club here in my little tiny town, and it's quite successful. And we've, had a huge impact in the community and made some money with it as well. And so I've had women saying to me, like, how come, like, can you come to Toronto and do this? Can you come to my town and do this? So I'm almost finished marketing like a cannabis club toolkit so that other educators can run something similar. And I know that there's women's cannabis clubs like nationally in the States and things like that, but this is a more community focused thing. So I hear what you're saying. Like, people will tell you, hey, I need you to do this for me because I want it so bad. So maybe listening. Yeah.
And they have so many other questions too. Like, if it was a local meetup and everyone's 30 to 40 and they're a mom, they're going to be talking about a lot of things that aren't cannabis. If it was a local meetup, and then cannabis comes in, it's like, well, I'm using it at night or during the day, or how, all those things. It kind of ties back into it. I always try to think of I think this is important for every brand, and especially like on the website, like one sentence or two. If that's all somebody read, they know exactly what you do and who it's for and what the value is. So it's almost like the brand tagline. And there's something around I'm trying to put the finger on stressed out moms that also use cannabis or something like that. Like, the thing is the overcoming this period in the 30 to 40 with kids. And it's so, there's a lot there. And then, oh, by the way, we use cannabis friendly to help solve these issues.
Right.
Yeah. That's the tagline,
Yeah. Yeah. I like that a lot. Have you seen or had experience with anyone who's running a successful membership type community?
You know what? I've only seen a couple, and they're not consumer focused. There's Elementa, I think is the name of one. Yeah. But I think a lot of them, their success is coming from other people wanting to do it. So other coaches coming, not as much the end consumer. Yeah. I feel like a lot of this stuff, the end consumer, it's one-off. They might have an issue, but once they solve it, it's not a reoccurring thing. And it almost, what is reoccurring is a community, because new problems come up. But if you're just solving the problem of getting the right edible dose, once they figure it out, they can go on their own. Yeah. But if it's how to get the right edible dose during the day, or if you have to work or parent or thing, there can be more of a repeating. And then the community piece, I think people want to meet and hear from people dealing with the same things they are.
Okay. I love this idea. I'm having some good thoughts about a community, like a membership-based community where you could really offer people the kind of support that they need, plus the actual community. People are really missing that so much.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're just coming out of lockdown in Ontario here kind of now. So we had our first in-person meeting of the Cannabis Club in over a year last night. And the women some of them were in tears because it was the first time that they could be with other people. So yeah, it's the perfect time to spend more time on community.
How much is the stigma still there? Like a mom using cannabis in Canada, or at least Ontario area?
It's interesting because still pretty stigmatized, for sure, still pretty stigmatized. But we are starting to have far more dispensaries opening up, and you just see it much more often because it's legal now. It's been legal for almost 3 years. So slowly you're starting to see people who would have never considered the plant, even at legalization, start to, it's just in it's in their radar all the time. Like, hey, here's this thing. So it's harder to be really stigmatized about something that clearly other people in the community are enjoying and looking for.
Yeah. Yeah. There might be another piece there too. Back to that brand statement, the stigma piece of it. People being really, even if they find it helps, they feel guilty that they're using it when their kids are around. And one thing I think we're going to see with cannabis is, alcohol is clearly socially accepted now. And if you have a couple beers around your kids when they're at home watching a game or something, that's accepted everywhere, right? Nobody would think that's a bad thing. But what is a bad thing is drinking a couple beers in the morning, maybe before you drive your kid to school. So what I think is going to happen with cannabis, where it's different, is cannabis, especially people that are using it for an ailment, are using it in the morning, in the middle of the day. and at the right dose, and they function better than without it. But there's still a stigma that like, oh, you're using drugs now in the morning. And there's prescriptions. We do this with so many things, but for some reason, I think around cannabis, it's going to be viewed a little bit more rec, and that's why I use that alcohol comparison. But I would think a mom that's taking it in the morning and then whatever they might be doing is probably feeling guilty. It feels like that's a wrong thing to do. So that stigma piece might tie back into your value offering. It's a private community. We talk about these things that are very hard to talk about or might be shamed in society. There could be, I think that would really maybe pull in that group that you're talking about.
Yeah, I appreciate this so much. I have so many ideas floating around in my head right now that weren't there, half an hour ago. So
I got a couple other quick ideas for you if you want to go this direction around marketing, where we were talking earlier about who your current audience is. I'm looking at one of your videos. You have some videos that have like over 100,000 views. That's amazing. I know. I'm really actually jealous. I might have to get some. I might have to call you and get some advice. We'll flip this around. But there's one video that says how to make cannabis infused drinks. That video going forward, if you want to do the switch, would be how to make cannabis infused drinks for moms with kids. And you see how you now are thinking of that. Well, what kind of drink would a mom with a kid actually want to make? Probably don't want to, so you start thinking that way, and it tailors your content to be more specific. And cannabis right now, there's so many people getting involved. If you do general stuff that's kind of like, well, anybody could watch this video. It's just such a sea of noise. But moms with kids from 30 to 40 probably aren't seeing cannabis-specific content with who they are, like, in the title. And that's where I think you'll find that audience, and it'll stand out more.
And what do you think about the fact that I'm now aging myself out? Like my kids are now 9 and 11, which I know is still young, but what if this does become a niche for me, and then 15 years down the road? I guess that's a really silly question to ask, because who the hell knows where we're going to be in 15 years? But
I'd also say it's perfect because you did it. You went through it. Who better to talk about something? I mean, it's not like you didn't ever have kids, you were on the other end of it. Yeah. You have the most insight and wisdom.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And it might shift too. Maybe it's moms with kids. That 30 to 40, I don't know if I'd use that specifically, like in marketing materials. But moms with kids, and then some other, if you can get more focus in that, or start that broad and see if it starts attracting. You might find there 50 and 60-year-olds that end up being on board. With kids, you're kind of talking about while they're still in the house. So, it's kind of back to that. Like, you might start building it and discover different audiences coming in, but you're also tailoring your content for a certain audience category.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and an audience that I'm really passionate about, and an audience that I think could really benefit by learning how to use it appropriately.
Absolutely. Yeah. And one other piece I had, if you do the private community thing, I would try to find a way to do a free version and a paid version.
Okay.
Because I think the people that will be coming in, like we said, they might feel guilty, or they might be ashamed, and they don't want to openly talk about it. So they can watch your YouTube videos, but they're probably not going to leave a comment because that's public. So if you can get a free private community where they can come in and get a taste, and then they decide if they like it or not, then there's a paid private community. It's like the level up. I don't know if it's more content or something, one-on-one access to you if they're in a moment and they need to call someone for help or what they should do.
Yeah.
Because you want to get people in, especially in this scenario. They need to see this private community and feel trust. They got to feel like they trust it, because their biggest issue is trust. They don't feel like they can't openly talk about this. So you got to figure out how to build that trust really solid before we start asking for, try to monetize.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. That's awesome. Thank you. I don't know. Thanks for spreading your wisdom all over me. I appreciate it.
Thanks. It's fun. I don't know. I don't think about a lot of these things until we just start talking to them. Sometimes I'd say things like, "Oh, I think that was a good idea." So, honestly, these one-on-one calls make me, you just reflect or think about things that you don't really dive as deep into. So, I always learn a lot as well from these one-on-one calls.
Good. I'm glad they're rewarding for you as well, because they're sure helpful for me.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, do you think you're going to make that shift, or do you think you'll go back and start, probably best to start brainstorming first, just all the potential categories that you could focus on? Because sometimes you get an idea for one, like the one we just talked about, and you're like, that's the one, and you start running with it, but it's always do a little more, research and upfront to make sure that is the right avenue you want to head down.
Yeah, I agree. I want to sit down with a pen and a paper and just let some ideas flow. But I have always been called to that particular niche, and I do know a lot about it. So, and I really liked what you said about if I'm just doing general cannabis education, then really that's really tough for people to maybe stick with. So
yeah, and I don't think anyone's going to pay for that nowadays, unless you have the cute millions of followers, because it's Google. There's so much out there, and it's hard to build trust in this industry because there are so many just shady operators. So yeah.
God, are there ever?
yeah.
But
yeah, I think you got a good direction. I mean, you got the background, the passion for the area you're focusing on. What you've built already. I mean, you've got a great starting base. I've actually been focusing a lot more on YouTube recently, so I'm really impressed with your channel already. I think you're already doing a lot of things in the right direction. To get up to 10,000 subscribers on YouTube to get to 1,000 is really hard. So that's
I know,
really cool.
I was so excited.
Yeah.
So excited when I got to 10,000. So
yeah. And these videos
and
on...
I just need Biden
what was that?
to legalize. Come on, I need Biden to legalize so that we can monetize the channels.
Yeah. That'd be nice. Run more ads and stuff. Do you know how much you could make on YouTube just from your views? Have you ever looked into that?
I don't know. I've tried a couple of times to investigate, like what would a comparable channel like mine make? But there's so many different metrics, like how long your videos are and how many people are watching all the way through. And there's a lot going on the back end there.
Yeah.
I do know that I have a friend who has a 12-year-old kid who has a YouTube channel playing video games. And he complained to me the other day that he only makes $200 a month from it. And I was like, you play video games on the internet and people are paying you. Like, come on.
Do you know how many followers he has?
He has 2,000. And
$200 a month.
Yeah, he gets $200 a month. So
in theory, $1,000 or $100 a month per 1,000. You're up to $1,000 a month, roughly, if you're just taking a guess.
That's why I need to come and have a chat with your president.
Yeah, right? Yeah. Yeah, let me know. Email if you have any other questions or as you're building this thing out. And let's check in a little bit later if you depending on what shift you decide to take.
All right. I appreciate this, and I appreciate you, and I appreciate the podcast so much. I feel like I have a really good handle sometimes on the Oregon cannabis market because of you. I talk about like the Oregon cannabis market all the time, and people are like, what is wrong with you? Oh, it's the podcast.
Yeah. Well, it is a good market. I mean, there's a few that, we're early. And I think we've also put in really good, comparatively good regulations. So I think Oregon is a pretty good model for hopefully what we'll see kind of across the rest of the country, other countries. But you also might see the Canadian model where, it's just bigger business and, those regulations really shift how what's needed in the market in the future.
Absolutely.
But if you've got an audience, you can always adapt to what's needed in the future because that's the most valuable thing there is, an audience that'll listen. Everything else can be figured out after that if you can build that.
Well, that's the hope. Yeah, just keep building that, make more of an impact.
Yep. Awesome, Andrea. It was good talking with you. Yeah, thank you.
It was great talking to you.
We'll stay in touch.
I'm like totally just going to go tell my husband, like, I have got to talk to Wayne. Yeah, sorry. I can't help it. I'm very excited.
We'll probably
Thanks very much for your time.
Upload our conversation next week, too, if he wants to listen to that.
All right. Sounds good.
All right. I'll talk to you later. Bye.
Thanks, Wayne. Bye.
All right, that was the episode. Thank you for listening. And if you'd like to support the podcast, you can go to periodiccaramels.com. We now have our line of hemp CBD caramels available to ship to almost every state in the country. I think it's 42 different states. That's periodiccaramels.com. We'd appreciate your support. And don't forget to check out the search engine we've built, periodicsearch.com, to quickly find answers to your cannabis questions. All right, thank you for listening. We'll be back sometime in the future with another episode.
The ideas presented in this podcast are meant for general informational purposes only and should not be considered professional advice. The Periodic Effects Podcast, Periodic Edibles, and all affiliated subsidiaries disclaim any liability for any damages arising out of reliance on the information presented. Please consult licensed professionals for any medical, legal, or business advice.